This is In-Ear Insights, the Trust Insights podcast. In this week's In-Ear Insights, we're talking about natural language generation and some of the newest capabilities that are available to everybody with what's going on. So a quick bit of background. For 3 years now, there have been these models. They're called transformers, just a type of software that have been used by artificial intelligence researchers to generate language. You give it something, and it's kind of like autocomplete, right? Where if you're typing along on your phone and your phone's going to try and guess the next word, this software does guess the next sentence. And the models have been evolving over time. GPT-1 was 3 years ago, GPT-2 was 2 years ago, GPT-3 is this year. And the company putting these things together, a consortium called Otter.ai, has released access to GPT-3, but not the model itself, because they've, the usual claims about proprietary, secret, and all this stuff. And so a lot of competing software models, again, other companies trying to copy it, have been released. And those are the ones that you can test out and run. And so where we are today is we now have a plethora of models to choose from. Again, different pieces of software to create language. And instead of auto-completing a word or a sentence, they're now starting to do things like paragraphs or entire documents. And that's the thing that I think is so fascinating, has such strong implications for marketing. So Katie, when I talk about a model like, for example, GPT-6J, what's your first inclination?
I understood the word plethora, and then everything else went over my head. No, I understand, the concept of the autocomplete based on, things you have previously typed. And so that's where, as a marketer, I would need it broken down into, what does this mean for me? How do I implement something like this? How does this change my daily job function besides, my text messages to my group text, suddenly getting, smarter or more savvy or smarter than I am? What does this mean for me as a marketer? And so while I find GPTBJ2QR, whatever it was, interesting, do I need to understand the mechanics of it, or do I just need to understand how it impacts me in the immediate?
Yeah, it's how it impacts you, and more important, how it's going to impact the people that you do business with, right? And what's going to change for their business. So let's do an example, because I think an example probably would help illustrate this. I'm going to go ahead, and I've pulled up a press release. So this is from Cision. This is a press release, and I'm going to take a few lines of text here. I'm going to go over to the Model 6 here. I'm going to put this in and say, run this model. And what this software is going to do is it's going to read everything that is in the first few paragraphs of this press release, right? And this goes on and on and on and on and on, as press releases do. And it's going to attempt to infer, what would the rest of this press release be about, right? And try to figure out, could it write the rest of it? So you have the chainmail grill brush, the upset grill pro, the chainmail grill brush pictured. So it's starting to essentially try to autocomplete what the rest of this release should have said. Let me pull up another example. This is one I did yesterday. Whoops, there we go. So this is one that was about trees. So trees and how it affects your plumbing. And the rest of this release goes on and on and on, as they do. And the revised version, you can see here in the second half, is ways to avoid plumbing problems include having tree roots be placed 5 feet from your bottom of your home, planting fruit trees 12 feet away from your home, keeping mulch down so that tree roots don't go down as deep into the soil. And when you compare it to the second half of the actual release, I actually kind of like the one the machine generated better, because it's more helpful. It makes more sense. Oh, these are things I should be doing to not ruin the pipes that go into my house with tree roots ripping them up. And so, from a marketing operations perspective, this is helping us essentially do the first draft on marketing copy. And it's not
Mhm.
always perfect, or sometimes not even great. Sometimes you get salad. But with each generation of model, the occurrences of salad get less and less and less.
So, how, without getting too deep into the technical weeds, you fed it two paragraphs from a press release that was already written. How does it know where to take it next? Is it pulling from, so I'm assuming what I know about AI is that, it can only pull from what it knows. So it was obviously fed other data in order to pull from. So is it going into its, large, vast database of other content and looking for, okay, what content do I have on grills? Because that seems to be the prevalent keyword. Or what content do I have on trees and plumbing? Because those seem to be the prevalent keywords, and pull out what I know.
Exactly right. So where this particular model, and that's actually a really important question, is where did this thing get its data from?
Mhm.
In the white paper that these folks released, there's this thing called the Common Crawl, which is essentially a crawl of a massive number of websites. PubMed, which is the medical archive,
Mhm.
archive.org, which is papers, academic papers, GitHub, Freelaw, Stack Exchange, the Patent and Trademark Office, Project Gutenberg, which is books, subtitles from TV shows. So you can see there's this massive, massive corpus of text that they've pulled data from, that helps it understand, like you were saying, infer the subject and then look to see what are the things that it knows from. Books 3 is a huge corpus of public domain and copyright released books. So when it pulls up something like plumbing, it can look in those books and say, okay, well, what things do I know about? What's actually very interesting about this particular academic paper that I thought was very nice is that in the appendix, they also tell you what is not included. So they've specifically excluded some things that they said they don't want in the model because it causes problems. For
I
example,
find,
fan fiction,
yeah,
the congressional record, etc.
I find it interesting that Wikipedia is included, because I personally don't find Wikipedia to be a quote unquote credible source. The reason, and sort of a quick anecdote, was because I have this friend who was responsible for updating Wikipedia for clients. And so he took it upon himself to include a Wikipedia entry for his dad, who was just a regular guy, and wrote this whole article about how his dad invented Peeps, which was not true. But Wikipedia took the information and now it lives out there as something that is internet true, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a little bit of pause when I see that Wikipedia is one of the sources of information.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones, PubMed, all those other abstracts, that all makes sense to me because I know the methodology behind vetting that information. But Wikipedia to me stands out as is that really the best source of information?
Yep. I would actually argue a Common Crawl also falls into the category too, because
Mm,
Common Crawl incorporates the extraction of data from places like Google News and things. And there are plenty of news sources that are not sharing truthful news.
correct.
Without getting too political, there's a whole bunch of things like, yeah, that's not actually true.
Yep.
But part of the reason that these sources are included is because they contain well-structured language. So
Mm,
understanding and being able to predict what's the next word, the logical word in a sentence would be something that these sources would be helpful for, even if they're factually not true. Because one of the things about language generation is that the outputs are not supposed to be factually true. They are supposed to make linguistic sense. So when we craft, for example, a piece of fiction or a blog post, we will still have to edit it. You and I will still have to edit it to make sure that what it's saying is factually correct. It will just
mhm.
mean less editing of language, or just in the case of some folks I know, just not staring at a blank page, going, "I don't know what to write about this topic."
Mm, that makes sense. And I think that understanding that nuance, is going to be super helpful in terms of implementing a technology like this into something like your content marketing program. So I think that there's the assumption that, well, if AI can write for me, then I'm out of a job. I no longer have to create original content. Nope, you still have to edit it, make sure that it's factually correct. AI might get you to a place where you have a grammatically correct piece of content, but the information might be a whole bunch of lies. And so that's where that human judgment piece, and that always goes back to, will AI take my job? The answer is no, your job is just going to look different. I'm definitely one of those people where I would have an easier time editing something than I would starting from scratch. And so that would be helpful to me if I could say, I want to write about, process development, but I don't even know where to start. But the AI could get me started. And then I'd be like, okay, now I know where to take this information. That would be something as a marketer that would be super, super helpful in kickstarting the writing process.
Exactly. And that I think is where there's a lot of value to what these things can do. Again, with the understanding that they're not perfect, and that there can be some pretty substantial issues with it, but it's a good starting point. So, for fun, we can take something that you said in a previous episode, and we put that in and say, try to create something new from this. And you can give these prompts like, write a thing about this, or in my case, if you're working on a blog post and you're not sure what to say next, put in what you've written so far. It will do an autocomplete, and then you say, yeah, that makes sense, or, oh no, I wanted to write about that instead. And to your point, it is useful. This could be used so here it actually interprets what you were saying because of the way you were using language as an interview, because this is directly copied from our podcast. Right.
That is, I'm like, I don't know any of these people. I don't know who Kevin Ballin is or Victor Farsick.
Neither
Sure.
do I. But you can see that it picked up on the language pattern of a podcast and try to construct more similar text. So it doesn't understand thematically what we were talking about, but it does understand the language type we're working with.
That's really interesting, because I'm looking at that, I'm like, well, I can't use that. And so that to me says, okay, so either we're not using the right content to model off of, or there's some heavy editing that would need to be done in place, which again is that human interaction with the AI. Now, is this one of those things where, for you personally, for your account, the more that you use it on your content, the more it starts to understand your writing style? Or is it just sort of generic for everybody? Everybody kind of gets the same output. Like, does it learn about you specifically, or is it just learning in general?
In these pre-trained models that have been released, these are the generics. These are the things that have been largely just put out there. If you, because this particular model is available on GitHub, you can actually import it and bring it into like your own machine learning instance. You can then do what's called fine tuning, where you upload your blog posts, your podcasts and things, and then it starts to learn and tune against the things that you provide. And the more things you provide it, obviously the faster it begins to train and expect certain types of language that you would use that maybe the general model wouldn't find as appropriate.
That's interesting. And so if I'm a marketer, which I believe I am some days, if I wanted to bring something like this into my team, into my practice, what are the things that I need to be aware of? What are my business requirements for bringing something like this into my practice?
You need a machine learning engineer that is fluent in Python, and you need a machine learning instance of some kind, like Google Colab, for example. We have a $10 a month plan with them. And you import this code, and you have your engineer essentially copy the model and set up fine tuning. And then you and your engineer work together to say, I need copies of emails, I need copies of white papers and webinars and transcripts and things to give it to the model to fine tune. And then they run this, and they tune up the model. At that point, you've essentially created a new model that's tuned more to you, and you keep refining it and tuning it. And over time, obviously, you spit back what it spits back the things, more of the things that you want to see. But in terms of what you need up front, you need that machine learning instance, the tools. You need the ingredients, which is the data, and you need the chef, the person to actually make the thing.
Is there a version of this that exists where I could just literally navigate to a website, paste my stuff in, and then get that back? Or I really have to have that machine learning instance? Like, could are there companies that host this where I could just sign up for an account?
They're starting to be certainly, like our friends over at Market Muse
Mhm.
offer a similar capability, but for the building that truly customized model to you, you kind of have to have it running in your own instance. Because even for SaaS companies, um, they will have data that is across their client base. They will not be able, they could not afford to maintain the computational costs of a model, an individual model for every single company. They might have models that are tuned to an industry, like our healthcare clients will use this model, our B2B tech companies will use this model. And honestly, if for like PR companies, PR firms and ad firms and stuff like that, that's going to be part of the roadmap for them for the future. If they want to survive, is they will have to have the ability to offer custom, at least industry tuned models for this
Mhm.
sort of thing. But yeah, if you want something that's you got to make it for you.
Got it. No, and I was thinking about, some of our PR friends who all they do is, create blog content and press releases. And so it sounds like if they don't have the capabilities themselves, then they should be looking for partners like Trust Insights who could build that infrastructure for them and generate that content to pass off to them to give to their team to edit, which I think would make a lot of sense. So it sounds like if you don't have the capabilities, you should start looking for a partner that does so that you don't fall behind in terms of where the industry is going with creating original content, churning out content. We were talking last week on the podcast, or a couple of weeks ago, I don't remember now, time is sort of irrelevant, um, about how the changes to Google search engine are going to impact SEO, and having all of that sort of 360 contextual content around a topic is really what's going to set you up for success with people being able to find you and you staying at the top of the search results. Well, in order to do that, you need to be able to create that content. In order to create that content, you need to have the resources. And if you're lacking on resources, which we know a lot of teams are right now, you need to have something like this AI paragraph autocomplete system in your back pocket in order to keep up with the demand. And so it sounds like there's a lot of things that would need to happen. First thing I would do is start looking for a partner that could help me.
I would say there's actually even a step zero before that, which is people, and the more savvy PR professionals do this already. People should be curating the content that they think is best in class, whether it's
Mhm.
theirs, whether it's their clients, whether it's competitors. If you have a library of, these are the blog posts that did really well in our industry, these are the press releases that actually got somebody to click on them, these are the top performing YouTube videos and the associated transcripts. You don't need an engineer, and it's actually frankly a waste of their time, to help curate and pull together that library of, this is the best of the best that represents what we want to be, the kind of content we want to create. Have that compiled so that when you do get to the point of either bringing it in-house, hiring an agency, hiring a machine learning engineer, whatever, you have that corpus of materials that says, this is what I want. And
Mhm.
it will drastically shorten the amount of time it will take to get that thing up and running. Because otherwise, as with any of these models, they're only as good as the data you feed them. So if you are having to wait for, a new white paper every quarter, it's going to be a long time before
Mhm.
that model spits out something that's usable. On the other hand, if you feed it, 1,000 white papers from your industry that all are relevant and important, like it will speed up the development of that model really fast. So kind of that step zero is already be aggregating that content. And I know some folks do that because they want to be able to train their teams and say, like, this is what we expect you to create.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. So it really becomes more of a research project first. Um, to put all of that together into one place. And, you know, something that John and I will be talking about on an upcoming live stream is how to research efficiently. And, first and foremost, it's, knowing what it is that you want to accomplish. And so you're not just going down that black hole of Googling around all these different topics. But, Chris, to your point about that step zero, it's really, what do we want our tone and message and branding to be when we're publishing content, even when we're doing it on behalf of a client? It still has to have our stamp on it. That's why they came to us to write for them in the first place.
Exactly right. Think about this. The model is the cooked dish, right? To make a dish, you need a recipe, you need ingredients, you need tools, and you need a chef, someone with skills, right? So that all that data that you collect, all those ideal things, all those, that corpus, that's your ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
Your recipe is the GPT pre-trained instance. Your tools are things like Python and Google Colab. And then the chef is going to be that combination of the machine learning engineer and probably a subject matter expert, because they're going to have to, depending on how specialized you are, they're going to have to look at things and to tell you, does this pass a sniff test? Like if this thing spits out a press release and you don't have the experience to know, for example, if it spits out something about viruses and talks about spike proteins and ACE2 receptors, that subject matter expert has to look at it and go, that makes absolutely no sense. You as the layperson will probably not know, the difference between a furin spike and an ACE2 receptor. The expert can say, that's right, that's not right, and then you can help retrain the model.
Yeah, I definitely don't know the difference between those two things, so I would need an expert to help me. But I think that that's also an important distinction, is that, you need to understand the content that's coming back to you. And that goes back to doing your upfront research, so it's not a shortcut in terms of, well, I was assigned a topic that I don't know anything about, so let me just have the AI do it. Well, that doesn't help you if you still don't know what the topic consists of, because then you have no way to edit it other than to make sure that it's grammatically correct. It could still be full of lies.
Exactly. So we are closer. I would say we are one step closer to the marketing singularity, in the sense of machines doing more stuff and taking lower value tasks off our plates. But to your point, this is not a replacement for people. This is not a replacement for expertise. This is an augmentation to help speed things up. But it will. I certainly would not just put prompted here and then just immediately copy and paste it to my blog. That would be a recipe for disaster.
I would agree with that. And so if you're interested in learning more, or you're looking for a partner to help you, or you just have general questions, you know where to find us. You can find us in our Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. Find us on our website, trustinsights.ai, hit up our contact form, or find us on social media at Trust Insights on most channels.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll hope that you have some fun building things, and we'll talk to you next time. Need help making your marketing platforms, processes, and people work smarter? Visit trustinsights.ai today and learn how we can help you deliver more impact.